All right, good morning. I'm Susan Fagan at the US EPA. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. I turned on the recording, so just so you know, and it's being recorded. So don't say anything you wouldn't want everyone else to hear. Judy Dew is not here. She's sick. She's worked on the presentation. And this is my cousin. He's our technical lead and the real brains behind most of what we've done. So if you have questions, we'll be happy to try to answer them. We decided to make this presentation about training because we haven't seen a lot of presentations here about how to try to train your users. Our system has over 5,200 registered users now. They're not all online at any one time. In fact, some of them have only ever logged in once, but that's how many different accounts we have. We usually average about 900 active users every 30 days. And some of them are the same of the 900, and some people come in and out depending on what they're working on. We started this slide with our hopes and dreams. We're part of the EPA Web team. We are not in the Office of Public Affairs. We're in the other part. We're in the Office of Environmental Information. So we're the infrastructure shop, if you will, the counterpart to the Office of Public Affairs, who are the content owners. And so in our dream together, our combined dream, we thought we'd be in charge of the EPA website, and that we had a big pile of pages on EPA.gov. We had over 500,000 pages. And in our dream, people would go through those pages, they would pick out the best content, they would write it for top audience, top task, and they would make it less verbose and get rid of all the government language and acronyms. And it would become a smaller pile of better maintained and better written content. And so we did not migrate content into our WebCMS with just a few exceptions. We made people, we called it transformation. We wanted them to transform the HTML files on EPA.gov into intended content, intended for audiences, intended for tasks and things like that. We also, I'll tell you the truth, we had the hope of cutting down on the number of PDFs on our website. We have over 500,000 PDFs on our website now. It's probably closer to 1 million. It's a hard battle to fight with content owners. It's easy to make a PDF. I'm not saying PDFs have no, oh sorry, EPA, oh you can't see that, cool. EPA wants me to take my little badge up. I'm not saying there's no reason for PDFs, there are, but they should be used for an explicit purpose in my opinion, not just for convenience of the person making the content. As you know, they're hard to make accessible, they're not very good on phones. There's a lot of reasons in my mind why not to use PDFs, and only one really good one, because you really need that formatting for printing or to tape up over something. It says, the 10 things not to do if you have a mercury bulb explode, or things like that, where you actually need to refer back to something, sort of like an instruction sheet or a fact sheet. So we didn't want to just take all the content and slide it into the system. We did slide in some content from our previously not very much used web content management called Documentum. Our agency had purchased Documentum for correspondence management and records management, and then they heard there was a web component for web publisher component for Documentum, and so they said, here, and you can publish web pages. And it didn't work very well. It was super Java and browser dependent, and only a few parts of our agency had started using it, but the parts that did, we felt compelled to help migrate their content in because they had already sort of gone into a WebCMS at our urging. And so we migrated in maybe 10,000 at the most pieces of content out of 500,000 that could have been migrated in if we had migrated from EPA.gov. And what our content owners wanted was absolutely nothing to change. Right? In general, they liked the way things work. They all had their own way of doing things. Some of them have very formal processes that required lots of people to sign off before something was approved. Typically, that workflow happened outside of any system. It might have been by email or some form, but it wasn't in a in a workflow kind of changing a state from draft to approved or something. And some of them had no workflow. Some of them just published whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Nobody ever looked at it at all. EPA is a very, in my personal opinion, EPA used to be an agency where anyone could do whatever they wanted. To a certain extent, it was very freewheeling. It's less so now, but it used to be that every office and region sort of had their own autonomy to do things the way they wanted to. And so it's kind of like a federation. One of our friends says that it's like a helicopter with a bunch of 5,000 separate parts flying in loose formation. That's sort of what EPA was. It was very much Just depends on who owned it, how they did it, is the bottom line. And so some of those people didn't want it to change at all. We have roughly 23 different offices and regions that have some amount of autonomy. Everything changed, right? So that's the good news and the bad news. Pretty much everything changed when we went to this web content management system. And one of the things that I tell people a lot is the part of the WebCMS that people don't like is the M. That stands for management. That means that you're actually supposed to approve your content, interact with it, check the metadata, take it down if it's old, update it if it needs updated. That's a really unpopular letter in the WebCMS. People like the content, they like the system in general, they like that it does things for them like responsive web design out of the box if they don't screw it up. They like that it works on mobile phones. They like that we have it backed up, so if somebody changes something and later on they go, who did that? We can say, oh, that was Jay Shirey02, changed it on this date and this time. They like that they can revert something if something goes wrong. They like a lot of things, but they surely aren't so happy about the management part of content. You're drawing more attention to actually managing your content. So we tried to reorganize EPA's website from our old information architecture, which was if you own it, it's under your organization. So like groundwater, drinking water had stuff up about things related to wells and arsenic and things like that. Of course, Office of Air had stuff up about MTBE, for example, a chemical that is useful in suppressing air emissions, but it turns out it's really bad if it gets into your drinking water. And so EPA famously, a long time ago, had a website that said MTBE is great because it suppresses air emissions. And another part of EPA's website said MTBE is terrible because it's really bad if it gets in your drinking water or in any of your water systems. I was like, well, you know, it just depends on who published it and their opinion of it. And so part of what we were trying to do was change to a topic-based website that's about lead or arsenic, or I started to say something that's not on our website anymore, or about another topic that people are interested in. And so the content, you know, lead, mold, arsenic, mercury, these are things that EPA, multiple offices at EPA might work on. And so now we're trying to make it a web area where it can have 20 content contributors. And some might be from the Office of Air, and some might be from the Office of Water, and some might be from regions, right? Because there may be specific information about a topic based on your geographic location. Have we succeeded in that? Yes and no, right? We've succeeded to a certain degree. What we've learned is what people have all learned before us. It's really, most of these things are not really a technology problem, right? They're a sociology and people problem. Most people don't like to change, not everybody. And people who've had success doing something, some manner of success in an old way, don't necessarily want to change. And we found it hard to get people to properly involve all the constituents of a topic. In theory, there's an editor-in-chief for every topic, and they're supposed to convene like a work group or at least a group email or a shared collaboration site. Like, what do we as an agency want to say about that or whatever the topic is? In reality, you know, it's usually like a couple of people that work on it and they get almost done and they go, oh yeah, we should check with the regions. You know, there's like 10 regions and they're like, oh, thanks for talking to us at the last second, or not at all until after you publish it. And so we're still working out the kinks in that, but it's really not, that's not a system problem, right? We have the ability to assign users from all over the agency to a topic. Each topic does have we have different roles in the system. So someone could be just a publisher or just an author, just an editor. You know, we have ways to help them manage their users, but we can't make them talk to each other, you know, outside and can decide on what the right things that should be on their web pages. But certainly the technology facilitates that if they're going to do that. Another thing that really confused our users is we have a Drupal 7 WebCMS. I guess I should have said that early on. And we went to Drupal 7, luckily at Mike's urging, in 2012 when we started this project. Drupal 6 was out and had a lot going for it, but Drupal 7 was newer. But it was a good move, looking forward to go to Drupal 7 then, because we're still on Drupal 7 now. And it's been almost 6 years. We published our first web page December 22nd of 2012, 10 months after we let the contract. And we're still using that same system. We continue to modify it and update it today. And I predict we'll be using it for at least another year or two. But it has a flat directory structure, right? Drupal doesn't really, it stores stuff in tables and things. And our users don't think like that. They think of like Windows, you know, because we're all basically given Windows machines at EPA. So then in their mind, everything's in a folder and they own that folder. And they had a hard time wrapping their head around the fact that they didn't do that. So we ultimately put organic groups on top of our content so that everything is in a web area or a group. And then we had to try to associate all their files and content sort of with their groups. Because they want to see my files and only my files. And they don't just want to see SFAG02, which is my ID's files. They also want to see LED's files or Water's files. Because that's just how they've been trained to think at EPA, is very directory-based structure. And the WebCMS really doesn't have that. All of our images go in sites, productions, files, and then the month, and then the day. And they're used to thinking of their images in like LED / something / images, like they're used to just thinking of it a different way. And so that's been a hard thing for people to understand, and they constantly want us to, quote, move their content to another web area. And we're like, yeah, you just uncheck the web area thing there and add another one. But it just doesn't make sense to them conceptually. One of the biggest successes we had, also thanks to Mike again, was we had a responsive web design right out of the gate. And I would say that was the #1 thing that really made people want to voluntarily come into the WebCMS. EPA doesn't really do a lot of command and control internally, at least we certainly didn't at this time in 2012 and 2013. And so instead of like forcing people, like you must go into the system, we had to give them reasons why they would want to come in. Obviously there's security reasons, there's rollback reasons, there's version control reasons, but those aren't really fun reasons, right? Only the security people and the managers really like those. But the fun reason was it works really great on your phone. And so we averaged about 30-something% of the traffic to EPA was on phones. It goes up and down. And so we would take our phones around and show people their existing website on our phone. There'd be all these scroll bars everywhere, and they'd be like, "There's no search box." I'm like, "Yeah, you keep scrolling over." And then we'd show them one of our websites on their phone, on our phone, that was produced from the WebCMS, and you could see everything. Yeah, it cascaded down. It was like little index cards, sort of. It's only this big or this big, but it was such a good selling feature for people to see that responsive design, and I think that is one of the main reasons why people voluntarily came into the system. And having that out of the gate was a big deal. In order to try to keep the responsive design and all the template stuff working properly, we tried to say there are no local styles. So in the HTML editor, we have a whitelist of approved tags, right? And occasionally Mike has to add more, for legitimate reasons. So when we were building the system, I was the project manager and what they call the product owner. So I was the person who made the decisions at the end of the day about what we could afford to do and what we were going to have on the very first day we published. And the contractor said, well, the easiest and cheapest thing to do is you just let them put local styles in and then strip them out when they try to publish them. So I said, let's do that. So they put them in, but they don't see them when they publish them. And they find that it took a little while, but they got the message after a while. The exception being the JavaScript field. We do have a JavaScript field, which I sort of wish we didn't, but we have to for some things. And so if they're really smart, if they have a really good contractor, they can, in fact, insert some things through the JavaScript field. We can run reports on that field, but it's sort of a lot of work after the fact to chase them down. But in general, if they put local styles in through the WYSIWYG editor, through the content well, they don't work. And it's really fun to answer those emails. Say, well, we told you there were no local styles, and the cheapest way for us to enforce that was to let you put them in and strip them out. Have a nice day. And I'd do it again. I mean, this is EPA's website. EPA owns the branding. I don't own the branding, but EPA does. And you don't have the right to make orange blinking buttons because you like that. And so we got our WebCMS ready in December of 2012. And we published our first content, and we needed to focus on training, right? We didn't really know how widely adopted it was going to be. We knew that there were some people, like the people who were in Documentum, were immediately happy because it was so much better than Documentum. The web publisher part, I'm sure Documentum's good at something. So we knew we were going to have like a core base of a small number of users. We really didn't know exactly how long it would take to build up a base of big users. And another thing is that EPA is all over the United States, and so we have people in West Coast time zone, East Coast time zone, middle of the time zone, right? And so if someone asks a question at 5 o'clock in California or 4 o'clock in California, it's really not that great that they have to wait until the next morning, and then you're writing them back at 7 or 8 in the morning, and it's kind of messes up their day. So we had to try to figure out how to deal with different time zones and locations. Naturally, we had very limited resources for training. Nobody really likes to spend money on that, often when they're working on development and projects. And we had really different training needs across our user base. We had people who literally could not follow the directions to insert an image or let it make a responsive table, a table with, not responsive, but 508 compliant with the headers and all that kind of stuff, column headers and footers. And other people who are trying to make like really complex forms with conditionals and all these things that, if then this happens, hide this. If they respond to this one, then show them that one. And they wanted to do really complex things with JavaScript. And so we had a really hard time we couldn't just standardize and say, here's one training for everyone. So one of the things that we came up with was something that we sort of called the help desk. And we have a group email box that at times has had as many as 7 or 8 people on it. Now I think it has 4. You write in with your questions, and people will answer them promptly. And you have to answer them promptly in order to get people to believe in that. And so Mike puts a lot of effort into it. I occasionally answer questions if I'm able to, or if it's Friday and I'm the only one working, or it's late and I'm still on my phone because I'm on the train. But we have a couple people who are really good at answering questions, and we try to reuse questions. And as time went on, we've tried to not answer questions in all the great detail, but to say, and here's the training page that explains that, right? To sort of force them to the training materials. So maybe next time they'll actually look at the training materials instead of just sending an email. Because the good news and the bad news about being really responsive to email is people just want to email you more. And then they want to ask you questions that are not about your system, but because they has the word web in it, and because you're responsive, they then want to ask you about all kinds of things. And so you have to really sort of manage expectations and try to do that. One of the things we did was set up what we called help desk hours. It kind of struck me as when I was in college many years ago, you had office hours if you wanted to see your professor. So we offered what we called office hours. And in the beginning, we made them like 3 to 5 in the afternoon, so that way the West Coast people wouldn't be completely left out of it. And the notion was you could contact someone and say, I want you to meet in person on Skype or on the phone or whatever, not in person, but together collaboratively, and you will help me with my problem. Show me how to insert an image or walk me through something. And it got taken advantage of some, not as much as I honestly feared. But I think that having the office hours was a big way to make people feel comfortable that if they got in trouble, somebody could help them sort of one-on-one. And so we no longer offer them at a specific time, but we just say office hours are still available. If you need help, contact WebCMS support, and someone will set up a session to help you, within we pretty much do it within 24 hours. And so I think that notion has really helped our user community. We built a trading site for our web content management system. We had it, Susan made sure and pushed everyone to make sure that it was ready when we launched our system. Because you really can't launch a system without any help, online help ready. And so our Drupal training site is, we eat our own dog food, or as I've been told to say now, we drink our own champagne. And so we published it out of our WebCMS. One of the complicating factors was our old system was both internal and external, meaning that some of the content was public and some of it was limited to EPA people. So we cheated. We published it in our WebCMS, and then we IP restricted it through our content delivery network. So it is technically on www.epa.gov, but you guys can't see it. Jacques can. He works at EPA. Or I can see it if I'm logged in here, but can't see it if I'm not through EPA's VPN. And I think it was part of the reason was because we really wanted to use our own system, and get familiar with it. We also have what's called our web guide, which is sort of a companion piece that is broader than just the Drupal WebCMS. It covers like EPA styles and standards and procedures and policies. We also have published part of that to the outside world as a separate web area because of contractors needing access who don't have VPN access to EPA. They should, but they don't. And so we've sort of had to alter that a little bit as we've gone along and move some things more into the public accessibility. But our training site was ready when we did it. We answer questions as they come in. We try hard to upgrade our training and add to it when we release new features. Mike puts together release notes for every release of the WebCMS. We're on 3.0.28, something like that right now. So release 1 was our first big release. Release 2 was December a couple years ago. We changed to the sort of universal design that came out of 18F. I forget what they call it now, US design or something. We changed primarily to that from the old EPA design. And release 3 is what we're on now. And so Mike publishes notes about the release that we're on now, bug fixes, new features. If we think they're complicated, we write a training page about the new feature and how to implement it. And we also, Mike also has the next release, that's not ready yet, but sitting there sort of queued up. And I don't know how many people look at the release notes. I look at them all the time. I get questions from people that say, did you just change this? I just went in to use this thing and it acts differently. And I go back to the release notes and go, actually, we implemented that 6 months ago. I guess you haven't used it, or you didn't read the release notes when it came out or whatever. But it's been really useful to publish the release notes and to upgrade them. We created 14 how-to videos. Honestly, the videos aren't used as much as we hoped they would and thought they would be. We tried to follow best practices. You know how when you have to do something at home, like replace the key and replace the battery in your car fob of the new car key you just got. You're like, how do I do this without breaking it? And you naturally get a YouTube video, right? And some person is explaining it to you. And what we noticed is usually they're only like 3 or 4 minutes and they're on a single topic. So we resisted the urge to make like one giant training video, and we made like 14 separate training videos. And we had to make them all closed captioned, so I think we used Adobe Captivate or something. We used software that would support that. And we actually wrote out the actual transcript language. And so they sound a little bit stilted because the person is reading that, but it was the only way that we could make them match the words. And people use them some, but honestly not as much as we thought they would. And I don't know that I could say if it is technically worth the effort that we put into them. Because it was a lot of hours of passing around the transcript and saying, that before we recorded them, saying, do you think this is the best way to say this? Taking screenshots, really putting it together. We've updated them at least once or twice, at least some of them, because they get outdated with, we changed the look and feel of something, or we changed, like we added this link it tool that allows you to link to nodes by browsing to like a node number instead of just typing in www.epa.gov/whatever. So the system can track the link rather than having it be sort of like an external link. And so that requires us to update our video and our training content when we do that. I still think it was probably worth doing, but it's hard to say. The numbers don't really make a great case for the use of the videos. We have about 70-something pages of training content. We offer classes a lot. We offer what's called like a basic class, sort of like EPA 101 on the WebCMS pretty often, like maybe every month or at least a couple times a quarter. We have hundreds, thousands of basic pages, and each web area has a web area homepage, and then it has other pages. And you can guess which one the people care about, right? Everyone cares about the homepage, even though that's like 1% of their content or 5% of their content. No one cares learning about all the other stuff, which like makes up all the rest of the real content. And so we struggle with that, but we try to have classes that explain what people want to know. We also offer some specialty classes. Forms, for example, is a class that people have been adding to and trying to adding new features to forms, like the conditional stuff and things like that has been popular in training classes. We did not start with this when we opened on our first day in 2012, but we had the ability to make different kinds of dynamic lists, where you can make a HTML list or a different kind of list by using metadata that finds other content in the WebCMS that's published that matches that metadata, and it puts it on a list. And so we offer a lot of classes about how to create dynamic lists. We offer classes about how to create events, which are effectively sort of calendar items. You can put things on that display on certain dates, and they have certain fields and properties, and you can link to, especially the regions like that, because they hold more in-person meetings with their states. Places people come into a place to comment on a regulation or ask questions or meet with the Superfund folks or whatever. We have classes on metadata, which are naturally less popular, but also important. As my friend John Shirey says, one of the problems with metadata is it's for everybody else. right? Because you know about the content because you wrote it, you know where it is, you know the location of it, and really the metadata is for everybody but you. And so it's hard to get people really interested in doing metadata, except for when we tell them it'll help with their search results. Bring them top, higher up on the search engine, or help them with outside search like Google and other things. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the most controversial things we did was to require PDFs to be attached to document pages. So what we do is you cannot, in the WYSIWYG editor, when you hit that little plus sign, you can put in any file type that we allow except for PDFs. So you can put images in, you can put Excel files in, you can put all kinds of stuff in. And we make you go to a separate page called a separate type of page called a document page and attach your PDFs there. The reason is because, as I mentioned earlier, we have over 500,000 PDFs on EPA.gov, and most of them have absolutely no metadata. Many of them are called like C user, local / desktop, whatever, or CTS user, because CTS is the name of the system for like our local help desk. Or they're called, nothing at all, or they're called fact sheet. EPA is a big place. There's a lot of fact sheets. So we made the conscious decision to require metadata on document pages, and our thinking was we could get them to fill out metadata on the document page, even if we can't force them to put it on the PDF. And since we also control our EPA search engine, we only link to the document pages in search results. We don't link directly to the PDFs in our own EPA search results. Yes?
Do you also make them, how do you deal with 508 in PDFs?
With what? 508 in PDFs?
Yeah.
That's a terrible question.
No.
So I'm supposed to repeat the questions if they can't hear it on the recording. So 508 in PDFs is obviously a big problem. One of the reasons why I hate PDFs. I hate people using PDFs when they're not necessary because it's so hard to make them accessible to everybody else. So what we do is we have like sort of best practices posted, but at the end of the day, like we're not the content owners. And so EPA now requires when you save a page, you say that you've made it 508 accessible. So I don't know if you have or not, but we make you say you have.
They're certifying that they're good. Yeah.
I mean, we tried to like ferret out any image-only PDFs and stuff like that by running programs that try to search on words. We try to do all these things to sort of help find things and restrict people. But if people really want to make a mistake at the end of the day, it's almost impossible to stop them if you're going to have 5,000 people that can access the system. So we force people to put their PDFs on document pages, but if they're smart, and a lot of them are, they can see where their PDF is located, and they can then later link directly to their PDF without going to the document page, and some of them do. The bad news for them is if they do that and their PDF moves, they've broken their link. And there's a few other bad reasons not to do that. If you put it on a document page, the WebCMS tracks the relationship, and so if you move that document page or rename it, the link won't break because it's controlled through the system. But there's still plenty of times that people link directly to the PDF instead of the document page, and we don't stop them technically. And so what we say is that most of the editors hate the document pages for the same reason that the search engine loves them, because of the metadata, because it has information. The idea was that users would put in a good short description that would let someone read that description and before they pay the price of clicking on the PDF, right? PDFs are generally big, they're slow to download, they're not very accessible, especially if you're on a phone or something. You really want to, like I hate when I'm on a website personally and it gives me a PDF with no warning and I'm sitting there waiting for it to load and I'm just trying to answer a simple question. So we try to help with that, but our users don't really like it. So we force the collection of metadata, and I don't know. I still think it was the right decision, but I understand why people don't like it.
One of the reasons why we make people jump through these hoops and make it harder for them to just default to uploading a PDF file. And I think we might even, in the future, make it even harder. I'm not sure how, but we really want to cut down on just bam, 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 upload a PDF file.
Like we said before, we're not saying there's never a reason for a PDF at all. But it's so easy to make them. And if you don't make them, if the content's not already sort of accessible in Word, doesn't have headers, doesn't have sections and things, it's much harder to make it into an accessible, my understanding is it's much harder to make it into an accessible PDF after the fact. It's much better to make it a good document with good structure in the first place. And a lot of people don't do that. Maybe they don't know how, maybe they can't take the time, I don't know. Yes?
Do you have any quality control in place so somebody doesn't just put some junk description in the metadata?
So the question was about quality control in the metadata. A very minimal amount, like you have to put in more than 2 words in the description field. And I think if you exactly replicate the title and the description, it flags it. There was a brief time period at EPA when someone suggested as a good practice that all the titles and descriptions match. I don't know why or how that happened, but it did. And so there's still some people who believe that. So it's just stuff like that. It's just, kind of dumb proof. You can't leave it blank. It'll flag it if you leave it blank. But if you type in test, this is test metadata, it will accept it. There's only so much you can do, and so much money you can spend to try to make people do the right thing. We also have views of metadata, so you could, if you were so inclined, look at all your metadata, separately, like sort of from the page and go through it. We did actually for a while pay some of our librarians to review the metadata on our most accessed web areas. To actually review it and send suggestions to the content owners about, we think you should change this. Some people, there's a small number of people who actually try to do a good job with their metadata. There is definitely some people, they're almost all women for some reason, try to do a good job with their metadata, but most people just, a lot of people type in the same thing every single time. It doesn't matter what the document's about, right? They just put in the keywords, like whatever their program is about, water, drinking water, water protection. Okay, but this particular document is really not, it's more about something more specific than that. Another big problem we have at EPA is broken links. Fixing broken links, making broken links. We have built into our system, doesn't work perfectly, of course, something to check links. It runs, I'm not ever entirely sure when it runs. It definitely runs on save for the stuff on the page, but then if the links on your document haven't been checked in X number of days, 24, 21 or something, it checks them separately, even if you haven't saved it or interacted with it. That's what our friend calls big link checker. We have big link checker and little link checker, but really we just run things that try to check links, right? And it reports on the status code, 404, 403, 301, 302. And you can get them by just your web area. We can get them for the whole system. And we eventually added color coding to the, it's not the only indicator, the number is written there. But we added color coding like red to 403 and 404 to say this is probably a problem. Yes, it's possible that it's really a 404 because the system timed out or it couldn't reach the other resource, but it's worth checking into. 403 I think means forbidden, and we have a problem sometimes when people don't make their links properly. They actually link to the internal address like WebCMS.EPA.gov instead of letting the system make the link to /node whatever or to www.epa.gov. And they go, I just published my page, and the links work for them, right? Because they're still in their EPA computer, and then they start getting messages from other people like, the links don't work on your menu bar. It's like, yeah, because they're not public. Yes, Mike?
One clarification on that. If we have pathologic, so if you link to WebCMS, which is that internal URL, it will change to www on publication, so that's not the issue. 403 come about because you're logged in, you can see every single page, you don't know that it's not published. But when you're logged out, you finally realize it's not published, that's where the 403 comes from.
Yeah, Mike's right. I forgot we added pathologic, wasn't after too long after we got started when people didn't publish all the content on their menus. But a lot of times people will link to someone else's content or amazingly enough their own draft content. And the link will work for them and then they'll publish the page, but they didn't publish the other draft content yet because it's not ready or somebody wants to review it. And it works if you're internal, but it doesn't work for the public. And so we teach classes on link checking. We have other tools that are independent of the web CMS like SiteBeam that help with link checking. And inevitably we get emails every week, someone saying, I checked, these 4 links are not broken and they're classified as broken. Okay, great. It's a source of frustration to our users, but we've just tried to get some automated ways to help them with this stuff. And everybody I know says no link checker works perfectly. There's always going to be problems between different systems contacting each other, different restrictions. And we tell people over and over again, we put it on the page what 404 means, what 403 means, 301 and 302, one's permanent redirect, one's a temporary redirect. we try to tell them all this stuff, and we just tell them over and over again. And we've tried different color coding that indicate, orange is supposed to indicate it might be a problem, but we don't know if it is, whereas red is supposed to indicate this is probably really a problem. And so some people do check links, and then they immediately want them to disappear off their list, and they're very mad if the system doesn't, get them off that list in like the next 30 seconds. But it runs cron jobs, right? And it depends on where they are and when they're scheduled and who's where. So it's like, okay, check back later. It won't be on your report anymore. So we tried to help them with link checking. It works sort of. I think that's true about most link checkers. But the biggest, we run the 4C satisfaction survey, and like one of the biggest complaints we get all the time is either links are broken or links don't take me where I thought they would. And so we try to emphasize good link text. We try to emphasize, checking your links and making your link at the right, level, depending on what you're going to, whether to go to the specific document or the home page or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's one of those M things that nobody likes, right? It's management. It's content management. It's maintenance. It's your responsibility. All we can do is try to help facilitate link checking within the system, and we have other tools that can be run outside of the system. It's kind of like 508. A couple people have asked about Section 508. We try to help with that. We use the Quail module, which I believe is just some scripts that are written to check for very specific things. It's definitely not perfect. It helps some. We've learned that we have a big header problem at EPA. People like to use headers because they want something to be big. They really don't think that a header indicates importance or meaning. And they really didn't understand that having your headers out of order might not be a good experience for people who are having the pages read to them or using assistive technology. And so we're still fighting that battle today, but our system, most of the Quail errors people get flagged for are header errors. They go H1, H8, H4, H7, H2, and I said, why did you make it like that? Oh, I thought it looked a lot better. Well, that's really not how you're supposed to structure your content. And so we try to help them. We have written some scripts that flag some things, but there's some things that, a human has to do. Like, I can't tell you if your alt text is good. We can tell you if there is some or not, right? That's all it can tell us is if it's empty or not. But it can't, and we actually allow empty alt text on descriptive images and things. I personally argue that you shouldn't have a lot of descriptive images, but that don't have any value. I mean, if you can't describe them in the alt text as having value, I'm not sure why you have them. But, so some things we can only bring to their attention and ask a human being to look at. So we try to help, and we make people, EPA requires now that you certify that your pages are 508 compliant when you publish them. It doesn't mean they are, but we're just trying once again to really get it in front of people's faces and to get them to think about it. We teach classes on what our Quail tool does, what our editor tool does. Emphasis is on headings, alt text, images. Judy put in here that it makes her crazy that it flags single word headers as missing text. I don't know why it does that, but she says it does. So it sounds like it's sort of like our description thing where we require a minimum of 2 words in a description, I think, and maybe a title. But what everyone in here, everyone knows who runs a system is nothing that works on an automated fashion is perfect. All you're trying to do is help more people than you hurt by whatever it is, whatever kind of report or cron job or automated thing that you're running. We also offer some advanced level classes. We have an intermediate class. We offer it quarterly. It sort of describes more complex things about how the system works. People are confused often about how to find their files because, like I said in the beginning, they're so used to a directory structure of EPA.gov /led/whatever/images/whatever that they can't wrap their head around a different way of doing that. We also use the Shield module, which allows us to password protect content. And so we also offer some information about this, how Shield works and when you can password protect and how we can take it on and take it back off of content. Because we have enough people that share content with either outside organizations or NGOs or partners and other agencies that they want them to be able to see it before it's published. So the way we do that is we publish it, but we shield it. So if you don't know the ID and password, you can't see it. And yes, we recognize that it could return back in some search results that way, but it's the best way we have to shield, to share content with people outside of EPA. Most users are casual and don't really understand how the system works, and they're constantly amazed at the things that it does and doesn't do that they somehow, through urban legend or belief, just thought it did or didn't do. And so we just answer questions and work on that a lot. We haven't offered advanced classes again for a long time. We used to offer them, and they were sort of like stump the band. They would, one of our advanced people like Mike or Andrew would offer a class with a couple things that they got questions on, and then they would say, what do you guys want to know about? And this is where you get some of your really complex questions and sort of use cases. But we just are, like every other agency, I guess, have been cut back in the last few years in both budget and federal FTE and contractors, so we just don't offer them anymore. And they just all bother Mike instead. And like I mentioned before, we do offer support office hours, and so we can schedule to help people one-on-one. We get a decent amount of use, and I do think it's made people feel safer about using the system. This is a screenshot of our training page. It has a list of our EPA Web training classes, has information on accessibility right at the top. It links to other resources. We point out beginner classes. And this is available obviously all the time. It links to things like our videos and stuff like that. We have a standard in our web guide. We have a standard web guide site that has everything else related to the web, as I mentioned, not just our training site is linked in throughout, has our policies, procedures, standards, and styles. We have 71 published pages in the WebCMS training site right now, 14 videos, and overall, I think our training efforts have made the system more accepted by our users. I'd say personally that I think our system is pretty much a solid B. I think that's probably a fair assessment, and I'm not probably an easy grader. And I think that the fact that we've gotten over 5,000 people to voluntarily register to use it, indicates that we've done a pretty good job with our training. So that is all of our prepared slides. I know we started a little late, and I can make a demo of something if people want or anybody wants to hang around. I'll be here all day. My name is Susan Fagan. This is Mike Kesling. If you have any questions or anything else you want to see, please feel free. Thank you for your time.